Eternity extends time into infinity. Dreams illuminate each moment within. When both shine in unison, the sacred Sakura blooms from the darkness, finally free from the clutches of the heavenly principles. Now the nightmare has dissipated, and reality is made whole.
Ma'am, what are you talking about?
Makoto's words have haunted me ever since this quest came out. I mean, planting a tree in someone's mind in the past from the future that ends up becoming real in the real world is a little weird, right? It's a little strange. What the heck is going on here? Well, I gotta tell you, the answer is actually quite simple. Truth is, we've seen a lot of what happened in this quest already, most recently in the Chasm's bed. This space and Makoto's realm of consciousness, and perhaps all domains, are all really the same thing and operate under the same rules. But before we dive down this rabbit hole, a quick note. This is a full-fledged speculation and theory video, not a recap of Hidden Dreams in the Depths, nor a recap of Transient Dreams. As such, I will be assuming you've already played both of these quests. You can consider this to be the true version of the video I was supposed to come out with months ago. Time Seeds and Transient Dreams. Look at me acting like I haven't been gone for 4 months. Also, this video is going to be very important for a couple upcoming entries in the Sun and Moon series, part 2 and also part 2.5. So, in true Kingdom Hearts fashion, I hereby dub this video part 1.8. Y'all are gonna kill me one of these days. Now, buckle up, get your brain juices flowing, and let's jump right into the space. Okay, so what do we know about this wacky little house of horrors? Well, it's existed for a very long time. Exactly how long is unknown, but we know that it at least predates the cataclysm of 500 years ago. Everyone seemed to perceive the passage of time differently in this domain to an extreme level. After the first day in the space, Ito thought a few days had already passed, while Paimon thought 20 days had passed, which is really weird. Initially, no one got hungry or tired, which led Yanfei to suspect their bodies were in a state of suspension. But that doesn't last long. On top of that, illusions appear that can interact with our heroes and even harm them, meaning the line between reality and illusion is extremely blurred. The space generates areas, objects, and enemies based on the memories of the people within the space, but also those who have fallen into the space in the past, like Bozacious and Boyong, and maybe even the people who used to live in the nameless civilization of the chasm. Remember those shades we see? They look strikingly similar to the Sin shades of Enkanomiya, with one very important distinction we'll talk about later, but their memories might be why we see their ancient architecture everywhere in this domain. Or this space could have generated them from our happy little band of heroes' memories, since they've definitely seen these ruins before. Either way, all this weird causes our adventurers to speculate the space is sentient, alive in some way. Xiao says that it's trying to consume souls, and Yelan specifically says a higher power might be involved. We've heard the term higher power used in a very specific situation, and we'll discuss that a bit later. So what's going on? The first thing that comes to mind is leyline shenanigans. The leylines are what carry memories of the world of Teyvat and everything that lives in it, the flow of time itself, and the elements. And ghosts, shades, after images, whatever you want to call them, are all merely leyline phenomena, memories made manifest. But what we're seeing in the chasm's bed isn't just that. The space is more similar to one big leyline disorder. Leyline disorders usually happen because something disrupts the flow of ley lines in a particular location so badly that reality becomes distorted. For example, the Skyfrost nail disrupted the local ley lines and caused an eternal snowstorm. An object, likely a nail, but it hasn't been explicitly stated in the story yet, fell on Tsurumi Island and brought with it a fog that never dissipated until the traveler and a certain emergency food intervened. There are also leyline disorders in domains. Sounds like we're dealing with something in a similar vein here. But there's one other massive thing this domain showcases, and that's the power of imagination. Specifically the power of wishes and dreams or some shit. Yanfei says the group's imagination could be used to their advantage to escape this space, and it is imagination that ultimately leads them to the fantastic compass. The one we used to escape was generated by the space in response to Yanfei and ultimately the traveler's desire to find it. The fantastic compass was just a product of their imagination that was brought into existence and sustained by the domain, which is why it couldn't be taken out of the domain. It's not the real fantastic compass. So what we're dealing with here is a sentient domain that can read the minds of anyone inside it, create trippy environments, fantastical illusions, and miraculous objects based on the desires and wishes of anyone inside. So long as these imagined things are contained in the domain, they can remain as real as shitty artifact rates. And this ain't the first time we've seen a domain like this. We've actually seen a lot of them. Remember Divine Ingenuity, the event that lets you create your own domain? Let me summarize its story for you. The Adventurers Guild found a special domain that created whatever a person inside it wanted. When they first went in the domain, it was just an empty room. It had a stone tiled floor that only went so far, and the rest of the room was just gray smoke. They tried going into this smoke several times, but they couldn't. They would just change directions or reappear where they started. It's as if anything beyond the tile floor didn't exist yet. After some time in the domain, they realized the domain itself was responding to their thoughts and willpower and shaped itself to look and be the way they desired. If there were a lot of people inside the domain, it would only respond to the strongest thought there. What you could create depended upon how strong your thoughts and wishes were. Like the chasm's bed, you couldn't take anything out of the domain. In order for the domain to keep what it manifested in existence, the people who imagined these places and objects needed to revisit every once in a while. Yup, these are pretty much the same rules and then some that we see applied in the chasm's bed, with one exception, but we'll get to that later. Let's write out the rules. For each domain, there's a master or mind. There are people who provide the imagination, whether that's the mind of the domain or people who happen to be inside of the domain. And then there's some type of energy source that likely originates from the master of the domain or elsewhere, like the ley lines, for example. You know, Kamina Harunosuke probably created one of these domains himself, the mystic Onmyou chamber. He gave control of the chamber to Shiki Taisho after he decides to find his purpose or some bullshit, aren't we all? So Shiki Taisho became the master of the domain. Shiki Taisho also supplied the imagination and shaped the domain to his will. The mirror monsters are just memories of monsters recorded and channeled into the mystic Onmyou chamber by Shikigami, who accompanied Harunosuke's samurai into battle. Harunosuke used Onmyodo to create the mystic Onmyou chamber, and this is an art of his own creation he made using his knowledge in the Tengu and Adepti arts, which means that he probably used something akin to subspace creation. Subspace creation is an Adepti art the Adepti use to create their abodes. It functions via imagination. Our Serenitea pots utilize this art too, and these pots definitely follow the rules. In this case, Tubby is the mind, who shapes the Serenitea pot via her own will, and with her own adeptal energy. She's so tied to the Serenitea pot, things would destabilize completely if she were to, for example, have insomnia. And you know who gave the Adepti the means to use this art? Zhongli. Yeah, Geodaddy. An Archon. He taught them how to do it, which leads me to my next point. Divine Ingenuity wasn't just some random event. It was a very clever way to explain what had just happened in the second act of the Imperatrix Umbrosa chapter, Transient Dreams. It's likely that all of the domains we just discussed are really the same thing. Realms of consciousness. Realms of consciousness in the Chinese version of Genshin are actually referred to as pure lands, a concept that comes from Mahayana Buddhism. Without getting too much into the particulars, a pure land is a celestial realm created by a Buddha, existing outside reality and within the primordial universe. They're kind of like a physical manifestation of the heart of a Buddha, an environment that reflects their enlightened perceptions of reality, and each one can have their own unique time time flows, meaning that 1 year in one Pure Land might be 5 minutes or 500 years in another. This matches up exactly with how the confirmed realms of consciousness in Genshin operate. The plane of Euthymia's appearance changes based on A's state of mind, and the same could be said of Makoto's realm of consciousness, which is mostly empty. And that makes sense because Makoto is dead as hell. In fact, Makoto's realm of consciousness looks extremely similar to the way the Divine Ingenuity domain's base form was described: an empty room with smoke at its borders, which at the very least would imply that the Divine Ingenuity domain and Makoto's realm of consciousness are similar in structure. Same thing with the chasm's bed. Realms of consciousness are even referred to as domains in the book Flowers for Princess Fischl, described as places owned by people highly skilled in the magical arts. I don't know about you, but all the domains we've talked about were created by people I would consider highly skilled in the magical arts. But wait, what about the whole making things that are imaginary real, like dreams and wishes and whatnot? And what about the timey-wimey bullshit that happens in the chasm's bed? Do these things happen in the confirmed domains of consciousness? Yep, they do. Let's talk about time first. After Aether and Paimon returned to the realm of consciousness to save A, 500 years had passed for A and the Shogun, while maybe only half an hour passed in Teyvat. Not to mention on their way back in, our dynamic duo experienced some turbulence in space-time. It's almost as if the realm of consciousness itself was one big ley line disorder, and if so, what was the ley line disorder caused by? The answer is actually rather simplistic to all of this. I think the flow of time in domains of consciousness is determined by how the master of the domain perceives time, which is why the flow of time is different in Makoto's realm of consciousness compared to Teyvat, and also why it's all wonky in the chasm's bed. In this case, time's passage was dependent upon how the individuals inside the domains perceived it. People can experience 1 hour completely different from another person. Some people are just impatient or anxious or dramatic. So 10 minutes can feel like 30 to someone, all depending on how that person thinks or feels, even though the same amount of time passes for everyone. So if time really boils down to how you think about time in a realm of consciousness, or how the master of the domain thinks of it, then how did Makoto view time? Or more specifically, how did she view eternity? Eternity extends time into infinity. A says that Makoto wasn't concerned with outcomes. She had a more far-sighted point of view. Makoto believed eternity is a period of constant change in which anything can become achievable, no matter how much time it takes. If you thought you had all the time in the world to achieve something, to chase a dream or a goal, you wouldn't really be worried about the passage of time. So maybe in her brain domain, time was limitless because she wasn't concerned about it. Another explanation is that time in Makoto's realm stopped when time stopped for her. Either way, each explanation relies on Makoto's perception of time. Long story short, time is just a state of mind in a realm of consciousness. But what about making things imaginary real in a domain of consciousness with a thought or wish? Is that a thing that happens?
No.
Absolutely. First of all, it makes sense that abstract things like memories, wishes, and dreams would become real in a domain of consciousness, because a domain of consciousness is literally someone's mind. It exists within abstract space. Anything can be real in your mind. An imaginary friend could be real. Albert's Barbara-sama body pillow he sleeps with every night could be fucking real. A tree could be real. When A planted the seed of the sacred Sakura, she made a wish on the seed. She wanted to save Inazuma from the cataclysm. A higher power heard this wish, we'll talk about her soon, don't worry, and the tree took root in not just Makoto's realm of consciousness, but in Teyvat too. It's like the tree is A and I guess Makoto's dream made real. It's also implied in the description of the dream Sakura that the sacred Sakura tree's existence is dependent upon the will of the one who planted it. That would be A. But as she says, her will surpasses time. As long as she keeps dreaming the dream, and a certain higher power keeps up her share of the work, the tree will stand for eternity. That's if everyone doesn't die first, which, But anyway, what happened in Makoto's realm of consciousness follows our little list of rules, but there's still an unanswered question. How does a dream or wish become an actual physical thing in the real world? This trick of making abstract things real might only work if Teyvat itself is a domain of consciousness. It's likely the sacred Sakura, which is a ley line tree, connected Makoto's domain of consciousness to Teyvat's ley lines, which is also why the turbulent flow of time to Makoto's realm was no longer a thing when our heroes left. The flow of time finally synced with Teyvat's. It's likely most domains in Teyvat are also realms of consciousness, or at least imagined spaces. The ones with ley line trees are connected to Teyvat. And wouldn't you know it, the mystic Onmyou chamber and adepti abodes all have ley line trees. Aside from the sacred Sakura, abstract things are made real in Teyvat all the time. Memories in this world can manifest from the ley lines. The fights and trance domains are all recreated from the traveler's memories, and those bosses drop items that you can use Dream Solvent to change into other boss drop items. They are specifically labeled transfigured dreams, and alchemy is used for the transfiguration process, which is hella sus. Speaking of the devil, remember when Albedo was able to make some chairs magically appear just from a painting in shadows amidst snowstorms? No. Albedo says that his painting is the blueprint, and alchemy allows him to omit the manufacturing process. Maybe somehow Albedo used the energy in the ley lines to make the imaginary chairs real. That would make some aspects of alchemy nothing more than an application of the rules of a realm of consciousness, or at the very least, the rules are similar somehow. Albedo says this process can even produce living beings, which makes me question the origin story of Teyvat and how the primordial one and one of its shining shades created life. And you know what? We've seen a living being created purely from a powerful thought or wish on Serenitea Island. Rue, the Thunderbird, murdered his people because they sacrificed Rue to her and cursed them, after which Serenitea Island would replay the day they were slaughtered over and over like a broken record for centuries. But isn't a curse just a wish meant to do harm? A person's hopes and dreams don't always have to have good intent, right? So what if her curse was really just a malevolent thought and wish that was powerful enough to be heard and made real? The space-time of the island was warped to fall more in line with the Thunderbird's desires, like the world was responding to her will. It's almost like Serenitea Island became a sort of makeshift domain of consciousness. But this curse of the Thunderbirds had another stipulation. The Thunderbird wanted to hear Rue's song again, so maybe the ley lines revivified him to that end, kept him alive over the centuries, kept his body in a stasis not unlike the one the Traveler and everyone else experienced in the chasm's bed. However, Rue couldn't leave the island, just like imagined things can't be taken out of the domain of consciousness in which it's created. He had to keep one of the Thunderbird's feathers with him to leave the island temporarily. And when Rue's promise to the Thunderbird was fulfilled, when her ultimate wish was granted, things changed. The curse was ended. We could interact with the souls of the people of Serenitea Island. And Rue, he started to get tired. With his purpose fulfilled and the will of the Thunderbird gone, reality was made whole. Time finally caught up to him. He went to rest, and we never see him again. Okay, so Teyvat, a place where if you think and dream hard enough, if your will is as strong as a god's, the world will hear you and make miracles happen. You could be like a god. Maybe now we know one of the reasons why the gods are keeping a close eye on humanity. But you know what? I've been avoiding the fly on the wall, the elephant in the room. If Teyvat is a realm of consciousness, who does it belong to? Who's its master? Who's calling the shots? Who's dreaming the dream? Well, if you've been paying attention to my videos so far, then you know the answer already. It's her, one of the guardians of the Irminsul tree, the tree whose roots make up the ley line network, the one who might be the tree itself, the higher power, the god of moments. You didn't think Istaroth had nothing to do with this, did you? That's right, I think Teyvat is Istaroth's domain of consciousness for several reasons we're not going to get into right now. And I also think that once upon a time, she shared control of it. Or maybe the better expression is she changed places every 30 days with her sisters. But if that's the case, there's something extremely concerning to consider here. Teyvat's borders are eroding, which means the mind of the world is eroding. It's slowly being eaten away, and I think the chasm's bed might be one of these places of erosion. It's like this place was no longer functioning properly and it needed to be separated from the rest of Teyvat, or else. Which is why it was hostile. Just look at the true appearance of the chasm's bed. It's a mass of crimson and black, colors that are usually associated with corrupted or cursed objects and beings, like Dvalin's tear, crimson agates, hilichurls and abyss order cronies, and also someone else. I have a feeling we'll be seeing more areas like the chasm's bed, and also that the feeling of Teyvat's impending doom will become far more palpable than it's ever been. I wouldn't be surprised to see Teyvat start to unravel. As just as I said.
Waking world, you seem woven from the stuff of dreams. All shall fade away.
And I'm just gonna leave it there for today. Gosh, that was a lot, but I hope it made some semblance of sense and gave you guys some food for thought. What do you think about all this? What do you think is going on in this game? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the other side of the moon.